we're going to talk deeply about conditioning today. And what I want to talk to you guys about right now is this is sort of the pith teaching of Buddhist psychology. So Siddhartha Gautama, this is probably his quintessential contribution to the psychology of self, and he was, I believe, sort of the first systems thinker, where he sat and he watched his own system, and he watched how conditions that came before keep the same pattern going now. Okay, now, if any of you are students of Buddhism or Buddhists, I just want you to know this teaching is taught differently. Traditionally, it's the 12 links. I don't have any problem evolving an enlightened being's teaching, and so I'm just trying to give context to Siddhartha Gautama. He doesn't start with this as number one, okay? What this is what's called universal aspiration, means every living thing wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. Think about yourself, but think about any animal, one-celled organisms, plants. Everything that's alive wants to move in the direction of making things better. That's what sort of evolution is all about, wanting things to be a little bit better. Nothing stays the same. Everything, life wants to make itself a little bit better. Okay, so that's the context. That's the condition in which beings arise. So here's where Siddhartha starts. He starts there with ignorance. The ignorance is that we don't necessarily know how to make things better. We also are ignorant of the fact that we're not a solid thing. We're a changing thing. And because we, all of us, I'll say the words again, cognitive reification, making something solid in your mind, we all have that habit. And because we do that, we suffer, which causes us to cling, to want things that we don't have, and we don't have the patience to handle it if it's not there. So here I am lying in bed, and I don't know how not to make things worse. It's not that something's wrong with me. It's just that given the conditions right now, want to be sleeping, not sleeping, my ignorance of how to do something in a skillful way is actually making it worse. And not only is it making it worse now, there's a mind-body network that's getting conditioned by how I'm behaving. And that's the third step, the conditioning. The mind-body network is a recording device. And so in the traditional teachings, conditioning is called karmic formations. So the actions that keep this pattern going. Now, what do those actions, where do those actions imprint themselves? In a consciousness. So your consciousness is there, and then inside your consciousness, now sense inside of yourselves right now, even those of you at home, sense inside of yourself as you're watching me teach, notice there's a sense of a self there. Well, that sense of self that exists in your consciousness is totally conditioned by what you've done in the past. Okay, and then you have a mind body, and so it's brain and body, like the whole thing is conditioned. And then what happens is that mind-body network has sense organs, eyes, nose, tongue, feeling, hearing. All of those sense organs go out into the world, and in Buddhist psychology, thinking is also a sense because it's always making sense of information. It's sensing itself as well. So these senses are conditioned. And then what happens is we come into contact with something in the world. A trigger, a person, place, or thing, a substance, a feeling inside, a thought inside, and whenever that thing shows up, we are already conditioned to react to it. And the conditioning that arises next is we feel and we start thinking. So that's where the very personal story of me gets started. And you can think of this as emotion, okay? We get emotional when we come into contact with that object. Just the thought of not sleeping. And then I wonder, am I going to sleep? That's this. Now, if I'm not mindful at that moment of contact, if I don't know what to do after I've been triggered, the emotion gets bigger. This is, right here, this is the cause of more suffering. This is sort of the thought distortion that makes things worse. In Western science, we call that craving or aversion, wanting, desperately wanting, or not wanting something, hating it. That's an obsession, okay? Thinking. So me lying in bed, I'm obsessing. What I do next is, and it makes sense, is grasping, or depending on what you came into contact with, fight, flight, or freeze. So this is the reactive stage. This is the doing, and once a person is extremely caught up in this cycle, they literally can't not do that thing. Well, I don't want to say it that strongly. They could, but it just seems impossible. I'll give you an example. So we're working at Sierra Tucson just last week, and I was working with the pain group, and one of the men in the pain group, we were all doing this teaching. We were sitting on meditation cushions, and he was listening. And then there was a clock behind me that said 2 o'clock, and he saw the clock, so contact. And right after he saw the clock, thought arose in his mind, time to take my medicine. And then, so he started to feel nervous, and he interrupted me. He said, it's time to take my meds. And I asked, well, so how are you doing right now? And he says, I'm not in any pain. And I said, okay, so just notice that you're sitting here, you're totally engaged, and so you're not in pain right now. But notice this interaction. I wanted him to wake up to the cause and effect. Okay, so he saw the clock, then he had the feeling, and then he had the thought. But then, after the feeling and the discrimination, he started to get really nervous. So then aversion, he started to obsess. And he even said, I'm really getting nervous that if I don't take my medicine, that I'm going to really be feeling it. And I said, and I honor that, and I'm not telling you don't take your medicine. I'm just saying notice that we're in a little bit of a feedback loop here where here you are, totally engaged in no pain, and then you just see something, then you feel something, and now it feels like an obsession, right? And it got so big that he did have to get up. He couldn't just sit even, because the class was going to be done in 15 minutes. He couldn't just sit, and so he did the flight. He went and he got his meds, and so when he came back, I said, here's where we can begin to work together. When experiences like that happen, we can begin to learn to notice that there's a sense of a self, and there are all these feelings and dynamics and can we just watch and breathe and in a sense, give ourselves a little psycho-emotional distance from the pattern? Could we? And the answer is yes. And what if he just set a conscious intention? So next time, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes of just sitting in the fire of this craving or aversion. What if I'm going to do that? And then what if he did it for 10 minutes and then 15 minutes next time, and right? And what you're doing is you're taking a nervous system and you're kind of trying to make it a little less nervous. The sense of self in that way is working on the neurons. Do you see that? And so it's a feedback loop. All right, so then after this, you go do the thing. That's what causes becoming. So becoming is the act is completed. It's when we feel like we've become the noun. So for example, I don't smoke, but let's just say that I started with this action. I took a cigarette and I started smoking it. And I don't know when this would happen. When would it happen? I don't know. I'll pose the question to all of you. So what if I did that, and then I did it again, and then I did it again? At some point, there would be this weird transition, some invisible line that would get crossed where I would become a smoker. Do you see that? And that's how it happens with everything. That's how it happened with my insomnia. There was, so I tell the story of insomnia a lot, and I had a young lady that said to me, because she started laughing, she said, I feel the same way as you, Mark. I have the same exact experience. And she goes, but I was working with this guy who came to work and he looked really tired, and I said to him, I said, did you get any sleep last night? He goes, no, I didn't sleep a wink last night. And I said to him, are you an insomniac? And he goes, no, I just didn't sleep last night. Right? So don't make a noun out of changing circumstances. That's the mistake that we're making. That's when we're piling on. That's the thought distortion. Do you see that? Okay, so the becoming then happens, and then now remember the context in which Siddhartha Gautama did his teachings. So it wasn't India then, it was feudal states, but India and Nepal is where, this modern day times, is where he did his teachings. It was the normal cultural belief to believe in reincarnation. And so this teaching can be thought of in a couple of different ways. One way is that after you become, so your karma has fructified, it's gotten solid, and then the next thing you know, you're giving birth to yourself in the next lifetime. But you guys, we can all just think about it as birth of the next moment. In the very next moment, we're carrying our conditioning with us. Whatever we do, we're going to carry it forward, and so we have to be careful about what we do. And then because everything is a coming and a going thing, everything's impermanent, there's going to be either, if you're thinking about reincarnation, aging and death, and then let's do it again, or if you're thinking about, okay, that moment is gone, and here comes the next one. Aging and death of this moment. And that's how it keeps going. So this is Siddhartha's sort of flow chart that shows the relationship between all the interdependencies, all the chain of cause and effect. Do you see that? And I think that's an amazingly pithy way to describe something very complex, and this fits in perfectly well with systems dynamics. Systems dynamics, living systems, are embedded in a network where there's a flow of energy and information, and everything is dependent on everything else. So he's sort of the first systems thinker based on this teaching. All right, so now, what I'm going to show you now is you're going to see a video. You're going to see a video of, if I were a cartoonist, I could take a pad, a flip pad, and I could draw a cartoon, and on the very next page I draw a little bit different and a little bit different. That's what you're going to see right now. And I want you to imagine that that's actually how life kind of makes itself, that every moment or frame conditions the next. And that's how we're going through life. So watch this. Here we are going through life, but in every moment, we don't have no will to change, but our will is conditioned. We don't have free will. Free will doesn't exist. It's a nice concept, but our will is not free. We are not free to just fly out of here. I'm not free to speak Mandarin Chinese right now. And presumably none of you are either, right? So our will is conditioned, but we can decide where to place our attention. That's within the scope of our will. And we could decide to watch where our attention goes and what it fixates on. We could watch when something arises, when that shows up, this shows up. And then if that happened, this happens. We can watch the coming and the going, and there can be a part of us that learns to monitor and modify that dynamic. That's how we evolve over time. That's how you change yourself.